Last week we made it across the wide, muddy waters of the Wash to the city of Peterborough. And that's where we rejoin our river journey, tracing the Nene from sea to source. You know, I always think that Northamptonshire's scenery is underrated. And sadly, this next stretch of the Nene is no exception. But trust me, I think it's beautiful. But first to business, your riddle. Those with vertigo, you'll love this bit. Needless to say, you need permission from very high places indeed to chain your bike to these particular railings. Now, Peterborough is not exactly the grandest cathedral in the country, but it's done well to be here at all. When Henry VIII was busily dissolving and demolishing the monasteries, this particular abbey was one of a handful that managed to have itself upgraded to a cathedral. The poor old wrecking crew trudged away disappointed. So here's your riddle. What do you think might be the connection between Peterborough Cathedral, a big wheel, and this lovely little lump of limestone? The stone bit of the story starts in the village of Barnack on the Northamptonshire-Cambridge border, where English nature manages one of my favourite nature reserves, the Hills and Holes. Hills and holes that hide an astonishing chunk of industrial archaeology. Believe it or not, this was once part of the great medieval quarry at Barnack. Oh, hear the cuckoo. Now, medieval stonemasons would sit around at night in the alehouse after a hard day down a cathedral, passing around pots of old peculiar and drinking toasts to all those billions of sea creatures, tiny sea creatures, that had selflessly given their lives to create these great beds of oolitic limestone. The masons loved it. They'd wax lyrical about its satisfying hardness, about its endless durability. And more than anything else, the ease, the delicious ease with which they could cut it in any direction. They couldn't get enough of it. And the abbot of Peterborough, who owned the quarries, was more than happy to supply it. And of course, that's when it got difficult. Because just how do you transport all that stone to every corner of the country? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking not by train they wouldn't. But you're wrong. No, only kidding, you're dead right. Barnack stone was brought to Wansford by ox-drawn sled. Then it took to the water, the route that's now followed by the Nene Valley Steam Railway, the line of the River Nene. Do you know up to 8 tons of Barnack ragstone would be loaded into the waiting barges to continue the journey downriver to the building site? Medieval bargemen took anything from 2 to 10 days to make the trip, depending on water, weather, and river police patrols breathalyzing boozed-up bargemen. You see, out there in the fens is some unexpected evidence that the bargees might have been driving whilst under the influence. Well, certainly without due care and attention. Of course, ask anyone who's involved in any big building project and they'll tell you it always goes absolutely exactly according to plan, doesn't it, John?
Not always.
That's right. Not always. And that's how some of the stones from Barnack fetched up here on what was once Whittlesea Mere. And these are the stones. How did they get here, John?
Well, obviously, they came by water and on a lighter, no doubt, or a barge of some description, and came in at Conquest Load, which is to the northwest, and on the old Nene course, and we're about to exit on the other side of the mere, on the south side, and no doubt ran aground in the field just opposite.
Because, I mean, this was all underwater,
Oh,
wasn't
yeah,
it? You're talking about 2-3 miles across and
That's
12
right.
miles around the perimeter.
Oh yes, quite.
So this was the shortcut out
Yeah,
of the Nene and across.
that's a deep water channel, and they must have missed it.
So what, they just hit a rise of
Well,
ground?
no doubt, yeah, there was a shoal and they ran aground, and of course no way of moving it.
So when they drained all this, they just found the remains of the boat?
Well, that's right. I guess it's probably the boat that stopped them sinking into the silt, because when my father came here in 1919, they were only a third submerged, and he got fed up with farming around them and loaded them up into a cart one at a time, and brought them and put them in front of the house that was here then.
What do they weigh?
Well, I think the biggest one weighs 24 hundredweights.
So that's ton and a quarter, isn't it?
Ton and a quarter, yeah.
In old money.
Yeah. I must admit it was quite a load in a cart. It was in a Scotch cart with iron tyres, so it'd take a bit of pulling with one horse.
So are these the actual mason's marks, John?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Very important, the mason's marks, because these were rough cut at the quarry, you know, because you didn't want to transport stone you didn't actually need. And they're shaped out, but of course the guy had to have some record of what work he'd done, and he did it by leaving his mark on it, because when it gets to the other end they tally up to see who's done what work. So the guy who rough cuts this sends off 20 of these in the course of a month or whatever. They tally it up, and that's how he gets his pay. So very important. What is this? Is it, do you know?
Well, yeah, it's quite like a W, isn't it? An A and a W.
I wonder if it was Ethelbert of Warbleswick.
I wonder.
I just made that up. I just made that up.
And I wonder whether it means this way up.
Yes. Apart from these occasional losses, the barge trains toil back and forth to Ely, Ramsey, Crowland and Peterborough with thousands of tons of stone for over 100 years. That's 4 generations of labourers and watermen who worked the back-breaking routes through these flatlands. And without them, none of the great ecclesiastical buildings of the Fens would ever have been built. Because eventually, the stone arrived by river at its destination. The Peterborough monks very sensibly used their own stone, and when it arrived to Peterborough Cathedral, this is where it fetched up. Now, the more observant of you will have noticed that although the cathedral's not exactly a long way away, if you've now got to start manhandling all that stone off the lighter onto ox-drawn sleds, move it all the way up there and offload it, that suddenly becomes an awful long way. So they solved the problem pretty much as they did at every cathedral in the country. They cut themselves a canal that connected the river right the way up to the building site. It meant that the heavily laden lighters, that was a contradiction in terms, isn't it? The lighters could bring the stone off the river, up the canal, right smack bang to the foot of the cathedral, right on the building site. There's just one problem that you've got left to solve. How do you then get that stone up to the uttermost spires on the top of the cathedral? Which brings us back to the big wheel of our riddle. A wheel that had its own mystery wrapped up inside it. A mystery that was solved by Zachary Taylor. They don't get any wider, these corridors, do they? He was the man who worked out how a medieval crane that the builders had left behind in the bell tower actually worked. He had the wheel to go on, but he also noticed an all-important groove in the axle. So right, reveal to me the secrets of groove.
Indeed. Well, it was certainly a mystery to me. The groove was there, and it obviously had some purpose because it was deliberate, you know, it hadn't sort of grown there. It suddenly came to me. Let's first of all look at what happens in using it, ignoring the groove.
Right.
Here we've got the wheel being operated by a man.
So a man would come up to about here on the wheel, yeah?
Yes, he would, about this high. The wheel, imagine, is about 10 feet in old money, in diameter. Okay, and here it comes. Now, that's just simply got a hook attached to the ropes around the weight. We'll assume that it's a piece of stone. Now, it's a perfectly normal hoisting principle. But let's suppose we change the hook,
Okay.
and instead we attach
Another
a pulley,
Right.
another pulley, a ring,
Uh-huh.
which I am going to attach.
And that
Now that sits in the groove, and on the other end of the rope we feed it through and fix it to the hook,
Right.
and away we go. We now are raising the weight. We're using the pulley block, and that effectively doubles the efficiency of the hoist.
And halves the effort.
Yes. So in fact,
Wow.
we have a 10-foot wheel, a 1-foot shaft. That's 10 to
Yeah.
1. So one man could be raising 10 men, but with the pulley could be raising 20.
Incredible.
20
Oh.
times his own weight.
All that from that one groove.
Yes. Now, I couldn't think of any other reason for it being there, not to mention the fact that it works.
Oh, wow. Oh, this is magic.
Isn't it? So you see, we have the groove. I can imagine that it was worn into this shape. It would have been given a start with some kind of a groove,
Yeah.
and then the iron ring, my assumption, iron ring was passed around. Yes, I haven't the slightest doubt that's what it's for.
When you actually see it in the flesh, it's really impressive, isn't it?
Wonderfully eloquent of a time long since gone.
Ah, carpenter's marks.
Ah, yes.
Ah, great. 2's worth 3. 3 up there.
And what does it tell us?
That they could put it back together again when they'd taken it apart.
Exactly.
These are carpenter's marks, see these little scratches, and they've scribed them in there. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You number the parts so that when you take it apart, you know exactly which joint goes back into the other joint, so you don't get them all muddled. Because all the parts look the same, but there'll be just fine differences because it's all handmade. It's not machine made, so there's just slight imperfections. You try to get the wrong joint in, the wrong tenon into the wrong mortise, and it won't fit. Get the right ones, they fit perfectly, and that's how they do it with those marks. They're all in sequence. 1, 2, 3. Amazing. It's all low impact, renewable technology, but it's high technology. It's highly precise, the way these things are constructed.
Yes, the principles, whilst following a simple line, a primitive line even, are not crude. There is precision.
Yeah, this is my sort of history, Zachary. This isn't great lords and knights and kings and queens. This is me and you 500 years ago hauling on the wheel. And that's where we did it.
Yes.
Do you know, I'll never understand this country. Here we are on a fabulous medieval bridge spanning the River Nene in the village of Wansford. And what do the good folk of the place want to tell you about? They want to tell you all about a fantastical character and a bizarre story from hundreds of years ago. Ah, well, you can't beat them, join them. First riddle. What do you suppose is the connection between the Black Death, a bridge and a haystack? The central character in this jolly little folk tale is one Barnaby, an unwitting waterborne traveller who was too mean to stay at the famous old inn that he helped to name. The next segment in this historically seamless saga has Barnaby fleeing from the Black Death in the reign of George III. I obviously fell asleep during that lecture, the Black Death in the reign of George III. Anyway, be that as it may, he fled northwards up the Great North Road to escape the pestilence, and was so terrified of staying in any of the inns or any of the hostelries where he might catch the disease that he opted, as night came on, to go into a meadow beside the river. And having clambered up into a haystack, he went soundly to sleep. One haystack going down the river. The thing is, you see, it's not a good idea sleeping in haystacks beside rivers, because as the night wore on, a thunderstorm rained down. And poor old Barnaby's B&B for the night, well, it sort of floated off down the river, until eventually it fetched up against the buttress or the cutwater of the bridge at Wansford. Barnaby woke up on his 19th century waterbed, helped himself to the complimentary coffee, and asked the assembled crowd, "Where am I?" "Wansford," was the reply. "What? Wansford? In England?" he said. Yeah, they replied. And that's it. Like I said, lovely bridge. And in fairness, it's a lovely inn too, called, appropriately enough, the Haycock. And just like Barnaby's, all their rooms have running water too. Further south upriver, you'll find the earthworks of Fotheringhay Castle, where the Elizabethans executed Mary, Queen of Scots. Conniving, manipulative madam? Or a careworn, misunderstood monarch? Well, in my opinion, no, I'd need a whole series for that one. Actually, if truth be told, I've never really been able to make my own mind up about this fascinating woman. No, best we leave Mary and tackle something a little less complex, the lantern tower atop the nearby church. And wouldn't you know it, it involves going up another lot of dark, dodgy steps. Past the flying buttresses, those insubstantial supports that create all the space down below, and up to the lantern tower. Its lantern-like windows are blocked off now, but once it may, or I suspect may not, have housed some kind of light. A sort of spiritual beacon, or an ecclesiastical lighthouse. Do you know, there's one thing I'm tolerably certain of in this uncertain world, and that is there's no way you're going to get me up this ladder and through that little hole in the roof just to go and have a look at the top of the tower. The other thing I'm not certain about, however, is why this lantern's been blocked off and how it's been blocked off. This is Jill and this is Juliet. What is the story about the lantern, Juliet?
Well, one theory is that it was in fact a lantern to light people, travellers, through the forest, because there would have been forest cover here. Not solid forest cover, but there was an important castle. So there would have been a lot of people coming to the castle. Yeah. And this could have been a way of guiding people through to Fotheringhay.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, this is something you need to remember. Forests, we tend to think of like Robin of Sherwood with trees everywhere you look, but medieval forest, that's not what that was like, was it? I mean, medieval forest was a word that described the landscape where the king and his chums could go hunting. So you'd have big blocks of woodland where the game could hide coverts, and then big expanses of land where they could ride in pursuit of the game.
Because the other thing is, I mean, it could be nothing more than the fact that it is a lantern shape.
Well, the other possibility is, of course, that it was painted white, as a lot of churches were, and there is some whitewash, still lime wash, down on the west face. And you can imagine if this whole thing was painted white, it would show up for a good distance.
Or did they have some sort of lantern itself within the lantern? That would explain why there's no smoke blackening, wouldn't it? You see, the other thing you're left with is, what about the wear and tear on the stairs?
What about the taking fuel up and down?
Yeah.
Or would they use oil?
But no, what
How big would it
Oil
want?
lamp.
Yeah, it would have to be an oil lamp,
It
wouldn't
would
it?
have to be an oil lamp.
I mean, I was going to ask you why and when it was filled in, but I mean, I don't have to ask why. You can hear the wind slamming into it,
Yes,
can't
you can.
I suspect that these windows were getting so much wind that it just blew them in.
What do you reckon? I mean, someone was trying to tell me the last time I was here a few years ago that these are actually filled in with gravestones, but logically, that doesn't. I mean, it doesn't seem to make sense that grave slabs you don't get in churchyards before about 1650.
They don't seem to be the right size to me.
And also there would have been, because of the dismantling of the college that was on the south side here, and the choir end, there would have been a huge amount of stone around.
Yeah, this is Henry VIII assets stripping the monasteries when he closes the monasteries down.
That's right.
So, and I haven't seen any writing on them. Can you see any?
I've seen what looks to be a bit of graffiti up there, which at first glance you could say, oh, that looks like a gravestone, but given how much graffiti there is around the rest of the building. Yeah. But if you just said there wasn't a light here, but it looked like a lantern, it was painted white and it had a similar resemblance, how would you then explain the wear and tear on the stairs?
Well, that's just so, yes. I mean, it is.
We're not going to get an answer, are we?
It's nice to have some mysteries, isn't it?
But that's what history's all about.
Yes,
it's looking at the evidence and saying, well, actually, I don't actually quite agree with this. And have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? And someone saying, no, but think about this as well. And
but isn't it
together.
Nice if there are still some mysteries and that we don't know everything? I think it adds to the interest, and we can speculate, as you say.
It keeps me in business.
So, just one more mystery left. Will L. Macpherson here fit through the side door of the aforementioned lantern tower? Just. Oh, wow. Well, that's us about halfway along the river now. And next week, we'll be in Thrapston. I thought you were going to say I don't have a friend. Asking a policeman advice on pronunciation. Refighting the medieval battle of Nettle on the Wold. And finally finding the elusive source of the Nene. See ya. Now what? Sorry.